The lace of Jasmine's wedding gown scratched against her skin like tiny knives. She stood in the back room of St. Mary's Church, watching through a crack in the door as guests filed into the pews. In 1 hour, she would belong to Torrin Campbell. In 1 hour, her life would end. Her hands shook as she touched the pearl buttons running down her spine. Each one had been fastened by her mother's trembling fingers. Her mother had not met her eyes, had not spoken except to whisper that everything would be fine. But Jasmine knew the truth. Nothing would ever be fine again. Torrin Campbell was 43 years old, with cold eyes and hands that lingered too long when he touched her arm. He had bought her family's freedom from debt collectors. The price was Jasmine herself, not 22 years old, and being sold like livestock to a man who looked at her the way hunters looked at trapped deer. She had met him only twice before today. The first time he examined her like merchandise, checking her teeth and her posture, and asking intrusive questions about her health. The second time he cornered her alone in her father's library. He put his hand on her throat, not squeezing, just resting there, heavy and possessive. "You will learn to obey me," he had whispered against her ear. His breath smelled like expensive brandy and something rotten underneath. Good wives live comfortable lives. Disobedient wives learn to fear the dark. Jasmine had not slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Torrin's face, felt his hand on her throat, heard his voice promising pain if she did not submit perfectly to his will. So her father had accumulated debts for years, gambling, bad business investments, loans from dangerous men who did not accept excuses. When the collectors came demanding payment, her father had nothing left to offer except his daughter. Torrin had appeared like a vulture circling carrion. He offered to clear every debt, to restore the Anderson name, to save the family from ruin. All he wanted in exchange was Jasmine. Her mother had cried when the arrangement was made, but not enough to stop it. Her father had looked relieved. Her younger brother had simply shrugged and said it was better than losing the house. No one had asked Jasmine what she wanted. No one had cared that she was being traded away to a man who terrified her. A knock on the door made her jump. A servant poked her head inside. "Miss Anderson, it is time. Your father is waiting to walk you down the aisle." Jasmine's father, the man who had gambled away their fortune and then sold his daughter to cover his shame. He would walk her down that aisle, with his head held high, as if he were giving her away in love instead of trading her for his own survival. She followed the servant into the hallway. Her father stood by the church doors dressed in his finest coat. He would not look at her either, just offered his arm stiff and formal like they were strangers. "You look beautiful," he said. But his voice was hollow, empty of any real emotion. The organ music began. The doors opened. Jasmine saw the aisle stretching before her like a path to the gallows. At the end stood Torrin Campbell, smiling like a man who had just won a valuable prize. Her feet moved without her permission. 1 step. 2 steps. The guests turned to watch her approach. She saw pity in some faces, greed in others, curiosity in most. No one looked like they might help her. No one looked like they cared that she was being sacrificed. The white runner beneath her feet seemed to go on forever. Each step brought her closer to Torrin, closer to a life of submission and fear, closer to becoming property instead of a person. Halfway down the aisle, Jasmine felt something inside her break. Not her spirit exactly, but the part of her that had been taught to be obedient, to be quiet, to accept whatever men decided for her. She stopped walking. Her father's grip on her arm tightened. "Jasmine, what are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. "Keep walking." "I cannot do this," she whispered. "I cannot marry him. You have no choice." Her father's voice was hard. "The contracts are signed. The debts are settled. You will marry Campbell or we lose everything. Then lose everything." Jasmine pulled her arm free. The entire church had gone silent. Every eye was on her. At the altar, Torin's smile had vanished, replaced by something dark and dangerous. She lifted her skirts and ran. Behind her, the church erupted in chaos, voices shouting, footsteps pounding, her father calling her name, Torin bellowing orders. She burst through the side door into the cold London morning and did not look back. The streets were busy with carriages and pedestrians going about their ordinary lives. Jasmine ran blindly, her white gown flashing like a beacon. She had no plan, no destination. She just knew she would rather die in the gutter than become Torin Campbell's wife. People stared as she raced past. A woman in a wedding dress running through the streets was scandalous, shocking, but no one tried to stop her. They just watched with open mouths and whispered to each other about what they were witnessing. She turned down an alley. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred with tears. The satin slippers her mother had insisted on were useless on wet cobblestones. She stumbled and nearly fell. One of the slippers came off completely, and she left it behind. That was when she heard them. Footsteps behind her. Men's voices calling her name. Torin had sent people after her. They would drag her back. Force her into that marriage. Lock her away somewhere she could never escape. Jasmine turned a corner and froze. The alley ended at a stone wall. No exit. No escape. She spun around looking for another way out. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she thought it might burst through. That was when she saw it. At the mouth of the alley sat a black carriage. Not just any carriage. The doors were lacquered black with silver trim that caught the weak morning light. The crest painted on the side showed a wolf's head crowned with thorns. The horses were massive black beasts that stood perfectly still, as if carved from stone. Even Jasmine, who knew little about London nobility, recognized that symbol. The Blackwood crest. Everyone knew about the Duke of Blackwood. Graham Johnston. The scarred monster who had come back from war with a ruined face and a reputation for cruelty that made even the king tread carefully. Mothers used his name to frighten children into obedience. Go to bed, or the Duke of Blackwood will come for you. Men crossed the street to avoid passing his carriage. Whispers followed him everywhere about violence and vengeance, and a coldness that made him more beast than man. The story said he had killed men with his bare hands during the war, that he had returned to London with scars on his face and ice in his veins, that he showed no mercy to anyone who crossed him, that he lived alone in his massive estate because no woman could bear to look at his ruined face. The carriage door stood slightly open, like an invitation, or a trap. Behind Jasmine, the footsteps grew louder. She heard Torin's voice shouting orders. Find her. Do not let her escape. Bring her back to me now. They were almost upon her. In seconds, they would round the corner and see her trapped against this wall. They would grab her, drag her back, and this time, Torin would make sure she never had another chance to run. She made her choice. Jasmine ran to the carriage and threw herself inside. She yanked the door shut behind her and collapsed onto the floor between the seats. Her heart hammered so violently she thought her ribs might crack. She pressed herself into the smallest space possible, trying to become invisible. Her wedding gown bunched around her like crumpled paper. The interior smelled of expensive tobacco and rain-soaked leather. Rich, masculine, dangerous. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to control her breathing. Maybe the carriage was empty. Maybe she could hide here until they gave up searching. Maybe this insane gamble would actually work. You are bleeding on my upholstery. The voice came from the shadows. Deep. Calm. Completely unbothered by finding a woman in a wedding dress hiding in his carriage. Jasmine's eyes snapped open. She looked up and her breath caught in her throat. Graham Johnston sat in the corner seat watching her, with the same mild interest someone might show a stray cat that wandered into their study. He wore all black, expensive tailored clothing that made him look like he was attending a funeral. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His posture was relaxed and controlled. But it was his face that made Jasmine's stomach drop. 3 jagged scars cut across his left cheek, running from temple to jaw like claw marks. They were red and angry, looking like they had never properly healed. They transformed what might have been a handsome face into something frightening. Something marked by violence. His eyes, though. His eyes were what truly terrified her. They were dark and cold and utterly empty of emotion. He looked at her the way a scientist might examine an interesting insect, curious but detached, ready to dissect her if it served his purpose. Jasmine tried to speak, but her voice came out as a broken whisper. "Please." "You are the Anderson girl," Graham said. It was not a question. His voice remained perfectly calm and disinterested. "The one being sold to Campbell today." Jasmine nodded. She could not form words, could not do anything but stare at this man whose reputation was built on fear and whispered warnings. "Does he know you are here?" Graham asked. "No. I just ran. I did not know where else to go." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Please, I am sorry for trespassing, but I had nowhere else. So you chose to hide in the carriage of the most feared man in London." Graham's tone was conversational, almost amused. "Interesting decision." "Please," Jasmine managed. Her voice shook with desperation. "Please do not send me back to him." "Why would I do that?" Graham leaned forward slightly. The movement was casual, but it made Jasmine flinch. "Campbell's business is not my concern." "Then let me go. Just let me leave, and you will never see me again. I promise, I will disappear." "You misunderstand." Graham's voice remained perfectly calm. "I am not keeping you because of Campbell. I am keeping you because you are currently trespassing in my carriage, and I do not make decisions under pressure." Outside, voices erupted. Men shouting, footsteps pounding on cobblestones growing closer with every second. Through the tinted window, Jasmine saw shadows moving, searching, hunting. "Check every carriage." That was Torrin's voice, sharp with fury and something darker. She could not have gone far in that dress. Search everywhere. Jasmine's blood turned to ice. Her entire body began to shake uncontrollably. She looked up at Graham, her eyes pleading for mercy she had no right to expect. But the Duke's expression had not changed. He simply watched her with that same clinical detachment, as if waiting to see what she would do next. As if her terror was mildly interesting but not particularly important. The footsteps grew closer. Closer. A shadow fell across the window. Jasmine stopped breathing. The door handle rattled. In one smooth motion, Graham reached down and pulled Jasmine up from the floor. He positioned her on the seat beside him, then draped his heavy cloak over her, covering her entirely. On his arm wrapped around her shoulders, holding her against his side. To anyone looking through the window, it would appear the Duke sat alone with his cloak bunched beside him. "Stay still," Graham murmured so quietly she almost did not hear. "Do not breathe too loudly." The door swung open. Cold air rushed in, bringing with it the smell of the streets and Torrin's expensive cologne. "Your Grace." Torrin's voice dripped with false respect, barely concealing the rage beneath. "Forgive the intrusion. I am searching for someone. A young woman in a wedding dress. Have you seen her?" "I have seen several young women today," Graham replied. His voice was flat and bored, as if this interruption was beneath his notice. "London is full of them. This one is my bride. She's confused. Not well. I need to find her before she hurts herself." How tragic. No, there was no sympathy whatsoever in Graham's words. "But as you can see, Campbell, I am alone. And I have an appointment I am already late for." "Close the door. If I could just look inside to be certain, close the door." The temperature in the carriage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Graham had not raised his voice, had not moved, but something in those 3 words made even Jasmine's heart stutter with fear. There was a long pause. Jasmine could feel Torrens' presence just outside, could imagine him peering in trying to see if Graham was lying, but the Duke's arm remained steady around her. His breathing did not change. He sat like a statue carved from ice. Finally, Torrens' footsteps retreated. "Of course, Your Grace. My apologies for disturbing you." The door clicked shut. Graham did not move. Neither did Jasmine. They sat frozen as the voices outside faded, as the search moved further down the street, as the danger slowly passed. Only when the sounds had completely disappeared did Graham pull the cloak away. Jasmine looked up at him. Her face was wet with tears. She had not realized she was crying. Her entire body trembled from fear and adrenaline and relief so powerful it made her dizzy. "Why did you protect me?" she whispered. "I do not like Campbell Graham," said simply. He tapped the roof of the carriage twice. The horses began to move smooth and silent. "And I don't like men who hunt women through the streets like animals." "Where are we going?" Jasmine asked. Her voice still shook from what had just happened. "Blackwood Hall," Graham said without looking at her. His eyes remained fixed on something outside the window. "But I cannot." Jasmine's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. "I have nowhere to go. No money. My family will disown me for running. Torren will tell everyone I am mad. He will ruin what is left of my reputation. Then it is fortunate you are no longer their concern." Graham finally looked at her fully. His scarred face was impossible to read. "You are mine now." The words hung in the air between them. They should have terrified her. They sounded like ownership, like she had simply traded one master for another, like jumping from the frying pan directly into the fire. But there was something in the way he said it, something matter-of-fact and strangely gentle that felt completely different from Torren's possessive threats. Graham was not claiming her like property. He was stating a fact, offering protection. Graham pulled a white handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. "You are still bleeding." Jasmine looked down at her hands. They were scraped raw from her desperate dive into the carriage. Small cuts wept blood onto her torn white gloves. She had not even noticed the pain until now. "Thank you," she whispered. She took the handkerchief with trembling fingers and pressed it against her palms. Graham said nothing more. He simply turned back to the window and watched London pass by. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It felt almost peaceful after the chaos of her escape. Jasmine studied him when she thought he was not looking. The scars on his face were worse than the rumors suggested. 3 deep lines cutting from temple to jaw. They looked painful even now. She wondered what had caused them, who had hurt him so badly. But beneath the scars, she could see the shape of his face, strong jawline, high cheekbones. He would have been handsome once. Maybe he still was if you could see past the marks of violence. His hands rested calmly on his knees. No rings, no jewelry. Just strong, capable hands that had pulled her to safety without hesitation. "Why were you parked outside the church?" she asked suddenly. The question had been burning in her mind since the moment she dove into his carriage. Graham's eyes flicked to her. A muscle in his jaw tightened. "I had business nearby." "That is not an answer." "No, it is not." He turned to face her fully. "But it is all you will get for now." The carriage began to slow. Jasmine looked out the window and felt her breath catch. Massive iron gates loomed before them bearing the Blackwood crest. Beyond them stretched an estate that looked like something from a dark fairy tale. Blackwood Hall rose from the landscape like a fortress. Gray stone walls, tall towers at each corner, narrow windows that stared down like watching eyes. It was beautiful in a haunting, austere way, the kind of place where secrets lived in every shadow. The gates swung open and they passed through. The drive was lined with ancient trees, their bare branches reaching toward the gray sky. Everything about this place whispered of power and isolation. When the carriage finally stopped at the entrance, Jasmine realized her feet were bare and bloody. Somewhere during her mad flight through London, she had lost both slippers. "I cannot walk," she said quietly, looking down at her ruined feet. "No, you cannot." Graham stepped out of the carriage first, then turned back. Without warning, he swept her up into his arms. Jasmine gasped and instinctively grabbed his coat. "Your Grace, I can manage. Not on those feet." His voice was firm but not harsh. He carried her up the stone steps as if she weighed nothing at all. Servants appeared the moment they entered. A severe-looking woman in a black dress took one look at Jasmine, and her expression softened into something almost motherly. Mrs. Thornton Graham said, "Prepare the East Wing guest suite immediately. Have a bath drawn, clean clothes laid out. Send for Dr. Morrison to tend to her hands and feet. At once, Your Grace." The woman's sharp eyes swept over Jasmine, taking in every detail. "Will the young lady be staying long? Indefinitely?" The single word fell like a stone. Mrs. Thornton did not question it. She simply curtsied and began snapping orders to servants, who materialized from the shadows. Graham carried Jasmine into a massive entrance hall. Marble floors gleamed under her. A grand staircase swept upward. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls, watching the scene below with painted eyes. He set her down gently in a chair, near an enormous fireplace. Jasmine sank into the soft cushions, her body suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "Wait," Jasmine said as Graham turned to leave. "I do not understand any of this. Why are you helping me? What do you want from me? There must be something." Graham paused. He stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost sad. "I want you to rest, to heal, to remember what it feels like to be safe." He glanced back at her over his shoulder. His scarred face was half hidden in shadow. "We will discuss everything else tomorrow. For now, you need to recover from your escape." But Torrin Jasmine started. "Torrin Campbell is no longer your concern." Something dark and dangerous flickered in Graham's eyes. "He is mine, and I have been waiting a very long time to settle accounts with him." Before Jasmine could ask what that meant, Graham was gone. His footsteps echoed down the long corridor, leaving her alone in this strange, beautiful house. Mrs. Thornton returned with 3 young maids. They helped Jasmine stand and led her through a maze of hallways. Everything was grand and intimidating. High ceilings, rich carpets, paintings and sculptures that probably cost more than her family's entire estate. The East Wing suite took her breath away. Walls covered in emerald silk. A massive canopy bed draped in velvet. Windows overlooking dark gardens that stretched toward distant woods. A fire already crackling in the marble fireplace. The maids worked quickly and efficiently. They helped her out of the ruined wedding dress and into a copper tub filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender. They washed her hair with gentle hands, cleaned her cuts, wrapped her feet in soft white bandages. When Dr. Morrison arrived, he was an older man with kind eyes. He examined her thoroughly and declared that everything would heal perfectly with rest. "You were very lucky, young lady," he said, as he finished bandaging her hands. "These could have been much worse." Jasmine did not feel lucky. She felt exhausted and confused, and strangely safe all at the same time. By the time the maids dressed her in a soft nightgown and helped her into the enormous bed, she could barely keep her eyes open. The pillows were like clouds. The blankets were warm and heavy. "Rest now," Mrs. Thornton said gently. She pulled the curtains closed, blocking out the gray afternoon light. "You are safe here. His Grace has given strict orders that no one is to disturb you." Jasmine wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand what was happening, and why the feared Duke of Blackwood had chosen to protect her. But sleep pulled her under before she could form the words. For the first time in months, she slept without nightmares, without fear. without the crushing weight of what tomorrow would bring. She was safe in Blackwood Hall, and somehow that was enough for now. Jasmine woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then everything came rushing back. The wedding, the escape, the carriage, Graham's scarred face and quiet promise of protection. She sat up slowly. Her hands were still bandaged, but the pain had faded to a dull ache. Her feet felt better too. On the chair beside the bed lay a beautiful dress in deep burgundy. Simple but elegant. Nothing like the suffocating wedding gown. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," Jasmine called. A young maid entered carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, miss. His Grace requests your presence in the library when you are ready." Jasmine's heart quickened. The time had come for answers, for understanding what price her rescue would carry. She dressed slowly, then followed the maid through the corridors. Blackwood Hall looked different in daylight, less forbidding, almost beautiful with morning sun pouring through tall windows. The library was enormous, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books, a fire crackling in the hearth, and Graham standing by the window with his back to her. He turned when she entered. In the daylight, his scars looked less angry, more like old wounds that had learned to live with the flesh around them. "Miss Anderson." "Please sit." Jasmine took the chair he indicated, her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "I need to understand what happens now, Your Grace." Graham moved to sit across from her. His dark eyes studied her face. "What do you know about me, Jasmine? About my history with Torrin Campbell?" "Only rumors. That you hate each other. That something happened years ago. Something did happen." Graham's jaw tightened. From 5 years ago, Campbell wanted to marry a young woman named Elizabeth. She had no family, no protection. When she tried to refuse, he began terrorizing her. Accidents that were not accidents, threats against her father. Jasmine felt cold, just like he did to me, exactly like he did to you. I tried to intervene. I challenged Campbell publicly, threatened to expose his methods. He responded by having men corner me in an alley. They held me down while Campbell watched, made sure the scars would be permanent. A warning to anyone who interfered with his business. Jasmine's hand went to her mouth. "That is horrible." Elizabeth married him a month later. Graham's voice went hollow. She begged me not to interfere again. Said he would kill her father if I did. 6 months into the marriage, she died. Officially pneumonia. But I saw her 2 weeks before. She had bruises around her throat that matched Campbell's hands exactly. "I am so sorry," Jasmine whispered. "I swore I would destroy him. But Campbell is careful, powerful. I spent 5 years gathering evidence, building a case even his allies could not ignore." Graham leaned forward. "Then you ran from that church, and I saw a chance to hit him where it would hurt most. His pride, his sense of ownership. So you were waiting for me. The pieces fell into place. You knew I would run. I hoped you would. I could not force you. Could not save you if you chose to go through with the marriage. But I made sure my carriage would be there if you needed it." Jasmine should have felt manipulated, used. But instead she felt something else entirely. Grateful. This man had given her a choice when no one else would. "What happens now?" she asked. "Am I bait in your revenge?" "No." Graham stood and walked to his desk. He pulled out a folder of papers. "These are your father's debt contracts. Every single one." He set them in the fireplace and struck a match. Jasmine watched the papers burn. "But those debts are gone. Your family owes nothing. Not to me. Not to Campbell. Not to anyone." Graham turned to face her. "You are free, Jasmine. Completely free. I will give you money. References. Help you start over anywhere you choose. And if I want to stay," Jasmine heard herself say. Graham's expression shifted. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Then you stay as my equal. Not my property. Not my weapon. My partner in whatever comes next. Torin will come for me, Jasmine said. He will not let this go. Let him come. Graham's voice turned cold. Son, I have enough evidence to destroy him 10 times over. And every day you spend here safe and free is another day he loses. Another piece of his power crumbling. Jasmine stood and walked to where Graham stood by the fireplace. She looked up at his scarred face, at the man beneath the monster everyone feared. You saved Elizabeth too late, she said softly. So you are saving me now. I am trying to. His voice was rough with emotion. I am trying to give you the life she never got. Then I will stay. Not because I am trapped. Not because I owe you. But because I choose to. Jasmine reached for his hand. Because you gave me something no one else ever has. A choice. Graham's fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. Are you certain? The scandal will follow you. Society will whisper. Your family will. My family sold me. Society can whisper all it wants, and scandal is better than captivity. Something like a smile touched Graham's lips. You are braver than you know. I learned from watching you. Jasmine smiled back. You face the world with scars on your face and ice in your reputation. But underneath you are the kindest man I have ever met. Kind is not a word people usually use for me. Then people are not looking closely enough. 3 months later, Jasmine stood in the gardens of Blackwood Hall, watching spring flowers bloom where winter had once held everything frozen. She wore a simple blue dress and no shoes because she liked feeling grass beneath her feet. Graham found her there among the roses. In his hand, he held a letter. News from London, he said. Campbell has fled to France. The scandal broke yesterday. His business partners abandoned him. His accounts frozen. He will never return. Jasmine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It is truly over. It is over. Graham stood beside her. You are safe, free. You can go anywhere now. Do anything. I know. Jasmine turned to face him. And I choose to stay here. With you. If you will have me. Graham's scarred face softened into the smile she had learned to treasure. The one he showed only to her. I was hoping you would say that. He pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple gold set with a green stone the color of her eyes. This was my mother's. It belongs to the Duchess of Blackwood. If you want it. Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. Is this a proposal, Your Grace? It is a choice. Graham took her hand, just like everything else between us. You can say no. You can take time. You can. Yes. Jasmine laughed through her tears. Yes, Graham. I choose you. I choose this. I choose us. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent. Like she was something precious he had waited his whole life to find. When they finally pulled apart, Jasmine rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Strong and steady and alive. She had run from one life straight into another, but this time she had run toward something instead of away, toward safety, toward choice, toward love, and that made all the difference. In the distance, Blackwood Hall stood against the spring sky, no longer a fortress, no longer frightening. It was home.